This is the Unearthing Art podcast with Michelle Luminato and Beck Lee, where we dig into the messy reality of making art that matters, raw and real conversations about being an artist, navigating the creative process, and expressing our honest and sometimes weird selves. I have some things on my mind today. I have been talking to lots of different artists recently over the last few weeks, and there's lots of things that I feel like are bubbling up out there at this time of year in particular. Partly because it's the start of a new year, and partly because for us it's summer over here, and there's a lot of people who are either coming off of a break or in a break or transitioning from a break. And I found it somewhat shocking, and I guess part of me wasn't shocked at the same time. There's a little bit of sense that some people feel like it might be a time to give up on their art and take a break or permanently quit. Let's start off with, like, first of all, we have breaks. That's inevitable. I think sometimes when we have breaks, we can either get, like, really relaxed about the break and kind of in that mode of, like, I'm not really feeling that inspired to do my work. I'm really relaxed.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that can feel a little bit like, am I actually that interested in doing my stuff if I feel like I don't have this real pull and desire? It's happened to me in the past for sure. I think it's a common thing that happens. It's something that it breaks my heart when I hear it, you know, because it feels just so permanent as well. And I think one of the things that comes up for me is like, what's behind that? You know, what's making people think that?
That is a very juicy topic. And I also immediately want to know more about your thoughts because I think I've said that to you in the past. I'm just thinking if this is the right path at all. Like, should I just toss this in?
Yeah.
And it's a strange sensation because on one hand, you've like been investing a lot of your time and energy and emotion. Like, we don't start off making art on a whim. It means a lot to us. And then from my point of view, from the way I felt in those moments, it's a little bit of maybe you start to feel a bit lost in your practice first. Like, you're questioning, is what I'm doing meaningful? I'm feeling a bit lost in the studio. And then suddenly that seems to fold into maybe I shouldn't be doing this at all.
Yeah.
And then I know from your point of view, because I know when I've talked to you about this before, you're like, what are you even thinking? Why would you even consider that? That's outrageous.
I think,
let's dig into it.
Because I think there's two things. One is being an artist is hard. I mean, I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, artist, like it's the easiest thing you can do if you're looking for something extra to do. Like, being an artist is definitely not easy, right?
Yeah.
But what would I be if I wasn't? That's my first question when I always think, like, if I just literally packed it all up, put it in a suitcase, locked it away, what would I be? I'm literally asking you. Like, I don't have anything that really makes my heart melt, you know, from that like internal place. If you feel that way, like, what would you be? Is there something really that's pulling you more?
Yeah.
I haven't found any industry easy. I mean, and that's just being like, I'm being completely honest. Like, everything takes effort. Being an artist takes hard work because you're really bearing your soul. And I think that takes some courage beyond, you know, working for someone else. And it takes a lot of internal toiling. Is that a word? Internal, you know, debating with yourself.
Work and
And sometimes you can literally let that, you know, negative debate get the best of you, you know?
Maybe you just get tired. Like you're saying, this time of year, you were talking about we've maybe had a bit of a break. We've been out of our studios for a little while, depending, as we talked about in the last episode, what your commitments are like, what you do around this time of year. And just in your mind, you're saying, feels like stepping back into the studio and kind of sensing like there's going to be this feeling of maybe pressure, maybe that kind of demanding work. And you think, oh, but the holiday feels so good. And then somehow we join the dots between that to, well, maybe I don't want to do the work anymore, but I'm not sure. Like you say, is anything without that level of, maybe it's because, and now I'm just putting things together in my own mind. I mean, it's not often that I think people have a 9-to-5 job. They have holidays and then they're like, oh, I've got to go back to my job now. The holiday's over. Maybe I don't really want a 9-to-5 job in my life. Like, of course, no one wants a 9-to-5 job in their life.
Gotta go anyway.
Gotta go back. Whereas maybe it's that art, pursuing art within our culture seems, we've talked about this before, a luxury, an optional. It's not something that there's a whole bunch of people out there going, yeah, go you, apart from Michelle, obviously, but a bunch of people out there going, yes, you can do it. It's worthwhile. It's, we believe in you. And so because you don't have that cultural, societal kind of thing behind you the same way as you would, like, everyone goes back to their jobs after the end of holidays. Maybe that's what makes it feel a bit more unsteady during that transition, because now you're kind of pulling on that burden is a strong word, but it's that self-motivation.
Yeah,
you've got to get back in and do it yourself.
Yeah. And it feels probably pretty heavy, I would imagine, as well. Mm-hmm. And I know from my own experience, the reason why the whole inspiration to creation process lives within my teachings is because of these breaks and me feeling lost in my process. Like, it literally came from this January break where I was like, what the heck am I doing? I've got lost in time and space with my kids' holidays and relax mode. What am I doing? Who am I again? So I think that it does take self motivation, and I suppose it's like that. It tests the commitment. It really tests whether you are a fair weathered painter, / artist, or are you like, no, I'm committed. Yep, here I go. This is climbing up the roller coaster again. We're going up the hill.
Now we're getting into it, Michelle. Now we're getting into it, I think. Yeah, exactly. And I like the way you say that, it's testing the commitment. And I want to say, as someone who can be kind of hard on herself and take things like that immediately to the negative, like, oh, I'm not up to the commitment then. I think I'm practicing taking that kind of perspective and giving it a useful and a helpful kind of twist to it. You can see that as a positive as well, and you can say, okay, it's asking me the question about my commitment, so it could be a time to really look at that, not just assume that because I've got the wobbles, I'm not really a committed artist, therefore toss it all in, but take a moment and take a pause, which, funnily enough, we haven't talked about this, but is exactly what I'm doing right now. Take a moment to slow down and say, what am I really committed to? Rather than trying to rush ahead into the studio with this sense of not being enough or not being up to the job, or that you need to force yourself into it or give it up altogether, that kind of really black and white thing. But I guess an opportunity to reconnect with, okay, well, I could give it up, but let me slow down and ask, what am I committed to? Which I guess is another version of what you just said, which is, what would I do otherwise? And I know you have said before that the framework and the inspiration to creation kind of system that you teach in the Origin Art membership, I know that you said before that that was as a result of getting back into the process after breaks. And yet somehow I hadn't really registered that in my mind and related it to this feeling. And now I'm kind of understanding that on another level, like, yeah, it's that reconnecting in a really deep way with, where are my desires at? What is calling to me? Where am I like really naturally
renewing? It's like to me, it's always been this renewing of almost like it's the opportunity to refresh, it's like you can look through it from a new, fresh lens because, you've had a break, you've had a little distance, and it's the beginning of the new year. And I don't know, there just seems like something really fresh about that can make you feel like, okay, it can be fresh. So you can really dig into what does that look like for you. So looking at it from, I guess, the opportunity of, what am I actually really invested in? And I think the other thing that kind of rolls into this, which is very hard to separate if you're selling art, but I know that if there's paintings we've made or artwork we've made, the studio's full of stuff, that hasn't been sold or passed along, moved along, whatever you want to do with it. That can be disappointing because you look at that and say, well, here's all this stuff. Why should I create more when I have this stuff that isn't really working? Or maybe not enough people have seen it. Whatever, there's a million reasons why it's still in your studio. It's not necessarily, one thing. But I think that we can look through that lens and go, well, that must mean I shouldn't do more, or that must mean, and so I think we take these disappointments, and maybe it is paintings that haven't sold, and we measure, like the 5 paintings that are sitting in front of us and say, well, those 5 didn't sell, I probably shouldn't do anymore. I mean, I'm being a little dramatic and exaggerating, but do you know what I mean? Like as if our future is dependent on those last 5 paintings.
Yeah, totally. And the same happens in the studio itself. You go into the studio for an hour, half a day, a full day, and it's a bit of a disappointing day. Things didn't come out the way you'd hoped. Maybe you didn't make progress or didn't sort of break through with an idea that you were wanting to pursue. So it's disappointing, and you think, well, that disappointment starts to define your whole idea that you have about who you are as an artist or what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's powerful because you think, I look at it and say, literally, are disappointments defining you and defining what your future is? Are they actually guiding your next steps? Yeah. Or are they something that we can say, that doesn't mean anything? I think the reality too, which we can just briefly talk about for a second if we can pause for a minute, but I think the market and things have changed, over the last, I'd say even 6 months. There's been a big shift, especially in Australia, and I feel like the low-hanging fruit as far as sales has dropped. Right. I think that this is a time where the cream rises to the top. And for me, I'm like, wow, this is opportunity, because again, I'm like, well, what is the opportunity here? And the opportunity here, when things that sometimes felt easy wins may feel a little bit harder now.
Interesting.
In that selling arena. So it might feel that way at immediate glance. And so a lot of people are going to literally use that as a excuse to exit and quit. And to me,
drop
it's
out
like
of the race kind of
thing. Maybe they really weren't, like, I am a diehard artist. I am like through and through. It's sewn in my blood. It's woven in there. You'd have to literally kick me out of the artist world. Do you know what I mean? Where I think sometimes people enter markets, and don't always do it for the same reasons. And so when it gets hard, people exit. Look at Bitcoin for an example, and then we can get back to this other juicy conversation. But, everybody joined Bitcoin and it went ballistic and crazy. And then all of a sudden it popped and it crashed and everybody sold their Bitcoin. And guess who's still in Bitcoin? The diehards, the ones that are going to make money on the next rise. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. I'm processing that. That's... I do know what you mean, and I do feel like it ties into the conversation because it's another factor that relates to that rise and fall of our own motivation and commitment. And it happens in the life cycle of, as you say, a diehard artist. Like if you're in it for the long haul, like you say, if you're following and kind of it's a lifelong commitment for you, then you're actually going to experience those cycles,
yes,
those ups and downs, and those can be cycles in terms of the market, cycles in terms of your own artistic practice in the studio. Like everything we've talked about, all the levels are going to have cycles, in sales, in your audience is responding to you or not responding to you, how social media is working, how the algorithm's working for you, how you're feeling creatively, how you're feeling energetically. And this kind of ties into what we were talking about in the previous episode as well, about recognizing those cycles, even in the course of the year. But again, like you're thinking long term, which means there can be decade long cycles as well. Even it's amazing how both macro and micro this is. Like even in a particular project, like you might have a fresh idea to try out in terms of your art, and it has a cycle. You can have an early part of that when it's full of promise. It's just a vision in your head and you get really excited about it. And then you start to try and put it into action, and suddenly some of the things that you thought were going to, be home runs off the bat, they're not working out. They're not coming out on the canvas the way you'd imagine. So then you start to have a little dip, a loss of faith in it. And then are you committed? Are you going to treat it as a journey of problem solving and continuing? Because as you say, you are a diehard artist. I mean, I could spin this out 100 ways. It's always so fascinating to me about how these lessons cycle through in the big landscape and in the small landscape as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's exactly. And to think that there wouldn't be cycles is really naive, I think. And I think sometimes I feel like some of the things I say is like ripping the Band-Aid off. But I think that there's always cycles. Always. There's always highs and lows and disappointments and highs. It is what it is. And to, look at it from the lens of, well, if the low-hanging fruit has dropped and it is changing, do I want to be the one of those people who says, that's a little too hard, I'm going to exit? Or are you one that's going to say, well, what opportunity is there? And I don't want to, derail this conversation more and talk about like what that opportunity is, but it's there. It's there. Yeah. You have to definitely set your mind up to look for it though. If we wallow in, oh, this didn't work, like the only thing you're looking for is what didn't work.
Yep.
So if we can sit in more of the question of, well, what would work? How does that look like? Because people are still buying art. They really are. And they're still looking for really creative things. They're looking for authentic things. And I've heard this on many different levels of many different industries. There's two things. People want authentic and they want connection. And I mean, amazing that our art can do that if we allow it to be that, but we have to be connected to our art. So if we're so busy being mad at it for the results it didn't produce, how are we ever going to feel connected to it?
Resenting it, questioning it, saying,
doubting it.
I'm not sure if I'm going to continue with you or not.
I'm not going to be your friend anymore. I mean, that's kind of how it is. Back to the relationship analogy.
It's kind of like threatening divorce every second day and then expecting the relationship to be real great.
Exactly. I mean, I think that that's the thing. Like, you have to be in it for the good, the bad, and the ugly,
I'm interested now to bring this round to where we started, which is this idea that we can go through times, and the beginning of the year is a big time when we can start to doubt our path. Should we be continuing as artists? Should we be trying to pursue this goal? And we've kind of talked about two aspects or areas where we can start to doubt ourselves, and one is in the studio practice itself, and then the other is in terms of disappointments in the market, like if our sales are different, are going down, or something's not working the way it used to. Do you find when you've been talking to people what is happening around this time of year the most, do you think? Do you think it's more the internal faith in your own ideas and your practice, or it is impacting people around the ideas of the market, whether that's actual experience of the market or whether it's just what other people are saying about the market, which is another.
I think some people are actually experiencing differences, and I think that is actually real. I think that particularly, I'm speaking about the Australian market at the moment, there was probably a more easy lower end market of buyers that I think is thinning out right now. And I'm just being completely honest. I just think it's kind of just the state of where things are at right now with the particular market that might have put money into that. They're making choices now that maybe they want to travel because they haven't traveled in 2 years. Maybe they have a higher interest rate on their mortgage. I mean, these are real things. New homeowner buyers are maybe not as positioned as maybe they were a couple years ago.
Yeah.
But that isn't the only area, of the market. So when I say the low-hanging fruit has dropped, that's what I'm kind of referring to. So I think those types of wins, or what I would say look like easy wins for beginner artists, I don't know that those are as easy anymore. Not only is there a lot of competition in that area, but I don't know that there's as many eyeballs looking anymore in that direction. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yeah. So I think that's where the market just shifts, and to see it coming and to know what to do next is the part that, we do have to adapt, which is the part of any business life cycle as far as opportunities come, opportunities go, and knowing what you're interested in and who you want to serve, that will depend on, are they still going to be there for you? Have they moved their attention? And if they have moved their attention, do you still want to serve people who buy paintings? Who's looking? Where are they? What kind of art are they looking for? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Maybe this is a tricky question. Maybe you'll just deal with it like that. But when I've thought in the past, and I'm thinking back, this is before I was an artist, but when I was doing creative writing in the past, and I remember particularly kind of tricky time, very similar when I was feeling like, this is just getting too difficult. I'm not sure if this is even the right thing I should be doing. I was speaking to a mentor at the time, and she said exactly what you said, which is that, well, if you weren't doing this, what would you do? And I said, and I thought about it, I really took that in and let my brain and myself, whoever inside me pop up an answer. And the answer that popped up was that, well, I would still do it, but I'd just do it quietly on my own, in a room. I wouldn't, if
you wouldn't tell anyone, you wouldn't put it out there, you wouldn't share it, you just hoard your little experience to yourself.
Exactly. If I wasn't trying to make this a success, if I wasn't trying to make this a thing, what would you do? What would you be doing, Beck? And I go, I'd probably just go and, to bring up again, the shack on the mountainside, and, now make art, but I just wouldn't be doing all of this stuff and having people look at it and judge it and having to work out markets and all that jazz. So I guess I'd still be an artist in that point. What does that say?
Yeah, but I think there's a question we have to ask ourselves, and this is something that I had to go through. So I'm speaking from 100%, cry my eyeballs out of this isn't working. I can't even tell you how many times I've cried. So when I say this, know that I've been in so many uncomfortable, ugly cries. My husband has witnessed, my kids have even witnessed it. It's real. Yeah. So, but I think we have to ask ourselves, are we really willing to commit to it? And what if we could actually know we could succeed? If success was inevitable, if you were if you really believe that, and I don't think most of us do. I think we do, but I don't think we do. And I've had a really big shift over the past few years where I'm I'm going to succeed. I have no doubt in my mind I'm going to succeed. It doesn't always look the way I imagine it, But it doesn't mean that I can't win at my goals along the way. So I think that if we can come up, literally have a like real frank talk with ourselves, like if success was inevitable and you really believed it, how would you behave?
Yeah.
What would that look like? Because those actions, those are the things that will change things.
Yeah.
But it's us doubting ourselves and second guessing ourselves and thinking, oh, I just live in a little hut by myself. Like those actions are different.
Yeah. I think now that you've said it like that, I think the response of, well, I do what I am doing, but I just like do it in a shack on a, forest with no one around is probably what comes to mind when I'm thinking that failure is inevitable. Like I think it's the opposite. It's thinking, well, no matter how much I put into this, eventually it's not going to work out. It's too hard. Yeah. So why put that effort in? I'll just jump to the
just jump straight to the failure.
Just jump to the thing.
In my failure scenario, I'm sitting in a shack by myself making art. But do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So it's an absolute turnaround. Like why if from your point of view, if success is inevitable one way or the other, why wouldn't you do it?
Yes.
Why wouldn't you?
But why would you have to do things that your other brain wouldn't allow you to do, And I think that's when really some shifts started happening for me was when I was like, yes, success is inevitable. And I have to do things that not everyone is willing to do, and I think I'm not saying me, I'm just saying the people who really fight for that commitment, they go in and they do the basics. I mean, again, I talk about this all the time, but it's the always looking at those foundational skills, and using those basics over and over and over that seem like repetition and boring, but it's the same stuff that gives you a new perspective. It's the same stuff that gives you more skills in your toolbox. So I just think that we have to look at it and say, well, if you don't believe that you're going to be successful, you just won't. Yeah. And your mind and your whole being will create scenarios where you'll literally fight for your limitations.
Yes. Another good one. Yeah. You're fighting for your limitations. Yeah. It's like you're fighting for failure. Yeah. From your point of view, when people like me say to you, oh, I don't know, just I'm feeling lost. I'm feeling adrift. I don't know if I should even keep doing this. What you're seeing often is an artist, you're, like you say, talking them off the ledge because you're seeing that they're making wonderful art. Like they're on the path. Like these aren't necessarily first day artists who aren't making stuff that's really wonderful and unique, which is funny because that's probably part of that whole learning curve and not knowing what you don't know, because I think the first day artists we're often like, the ones with a lot of confidence. A lot of confidence, and it's this kind of mid journey, like it's the testing point. Yes. And we're seeing some beautiful art, and then you just can't imagine why. And I've had these conversations too with other people, and you just can't imagine the person who created that saying, I'm not sure if I should even continue doing this. It's just like,
it's just unimaginable. You're like, no, that's not possible. But I think that, again, it's just not trusting ourselves, not believing in ourselves, which is it's understandable. And again, I'm not saying like, don't be like this. It's totally understandable. It's trying. It's difficult. It's lonely. It's isolating, and our head has so much chatter. And then, put the extra outside noise of, interest rates are going up. COVID's, been around forever, and all this stuff. It just is louder than the internal voice of saying, I can do this. And what I make matters. That's the other part. I'm going to start yelling through the microphone back because I'm like,
I'm going to turn the levels down.
Stuff matters. I just feel like screaming. Your stuff matters. Your unique point of view. That's what people are looking for. It really does matter. And to water it down in terms of not, when I say water it down, like trying to appeal to the masses versus, really living through your own truth. It really is something that people will value more of a unique point of view. Every gallery that I've ever talked to in terms of, whether it's a gallery manager, or owner, whatever, the one word that comes out of their mouth is they want something unique. It's not like they're like, yeah, I'm looking for the same thing that the 40 other artists I'm doing are doing. You know what I mean? Like they're looking for unique. And to get to that point where our voice really shines through as uniquely as we each are, because to say that we're not individually unique is ridiculous. So how could our art not be unique, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But to allow it to not be blocked, to allow it to really shine within, and to literally put that energy into a piece of art that people can get, that takes effort.
Yeah.
But it's as unique as you already are. So they're like, it's inevitable.
It's inevitable. I love this. So what I'm going to take away from this is what you have within you, what you make matters.
Yes.
And it's there. The uniqueness is there. You only need to commit to it and dig deep, put in the effort to get there, and trust that it's inevitable.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. I think hopefully that's a kind of a final uplifting message for anyone, any artists out there who are feeling those start of the year wobbles.
Yeah.
I like to call these sorts of things wobbles. It sounds a bit less critical. It's not like a crisis. It's just a wobble.
Yes.
You can correct.
I love that you've now framed it as a wobble. See, look at Beck's growth. I mean, it's been the Titanic and now it's just a wobble.
Yeah, it's just a little wobble. No one's going down.
Yes. You got this. I totally believe in every one of us. I really do.